Well, for more, we can cross to New York and speak to lawyer and former prosecutor Stephen Dreyfuss. Hello to you, Stephen. National injunction. It's something that both Democratic and Republican administrations have done. Can you take us a little bit through the Supreme Court ruling?
Well, what they've done is quite interesting because they did not address the question of whether the Constitution permits this action by President Trump that purports to deny American nationality to children born of parents who are not citizens and not in the country legally. It bypassed it because, of course, the government bypassed it in the appeal and only challenged the remedy, which is the nationwide injunction. That's really it, because it's really quite clear if you look at the language of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. It says that everybody who is born in the United States is a citizen. So the government did not want to risk a situation where the Supreme Court would establish a nationwide rule striking down the executive order. So all they challenged was the fact that the lower court issued a nationwide injunction against enforcement of it. And what they've held basically is that an injunction that's issued by a court only applies to the actual plaintiffs, the actual parties to that action, rather than beyond them to the whole country as a whole. And this is a matter that, as you point out, both Democratic and Republican administrations have struggled with for a long time. You may recall that during the Biden administration, there was a single judge in Texas who outlawed the use of an abortion drug for the whole country, even though it had been approved by the drug authorities for the United States. So it cuts both ways. But as you saw from that clip of President Trump's reaction, he intends to try to use this to prevent the courts from interfering with a whole range of policies that he has put out in executive orders since he took office in January. And the question will be, what will be the judicial remedy available? And the court laid out a bit what the options could be, particularly the possibility of a class action, which is an action which is brought on behalf of a whole class of people. And theoretically, the lower court could say, I recognize a class of all mothers who are pregnant and will be giving birth in the United States who are not citizens, and decide the case on that basis. The other thing that the court left open was the possibility that states could bring an action and obtain an injunction against an illegal executive order that would apply in the whole state. So you could, as in this case, there were something like, I think, 22 states who were parties to this case. And the court has remanded to the lower courts the determination of what their rights are. So that potentially could create a broader enforcement of the Constitution as against the executive order of the president.
Yeah, that's what I saw as well, 22. So that means in the other 28 states, this executive order to end birthright citizenship, that goes into effect?
It's going to go into effect in 30 days everywhere, unless and until one of the lower courts recognizes the validity of one of the state's claims that it is illegal, in which point it will not go into effect in those states who are parties to that action. It creates a very unusual and situation, as has been pointed out by the dissents in this case, because you could have someone who is born in one state who would not be a citizen if they were born in another state. Rather than having a single rule for the United States, it will be extremely difficult to manage. So there is a lot here that will go down to the lower courts and then come back up to the Supreme Court. And eventually, and there's a debate about how quickly it will happen, the Supreme Court is going to have to pass on the constitutionality of this executive order. And it's pretty clear that the order is not constitutional. So the question will be procedurally, how long does it take for the Supreme Court to say so?
And in the meantime, this ruling does broaden presidential powers, whether for Trump or whoever follows him. It's been a while since my constitutional law or civics classes, Stephen, but as I recall, the U.S. Constitution establishes 3 separate but equal branches of government. Does this challenge that balance?
Well, it's interesting because the majority opinion in the court pointed out that this limits the judiciary's role to what it says is its proper role, and prevents the creation of an imperial judiciary that has undue power over the executive. But it is true that ever since 1803, the very beginning of the United States, the Supreme Court has held that it is, as it put it emphatically, the province of the judicial branch to say what the law is. In this case, when they get to the merits, and they have deliberately chosen to avoid the merits in this decision yesterday, they are going to have to say whether this executive order is consistent with the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. And it very clearly is in so many words. It's the text that is absolutely clear. So eventually the court will say what it is, but what they're basically saying is that the only court that should be allowed to establish a nationwide rule is the Supreme Court of the United States, and that a lower court should not have the power all by itself to issue an injunction that covers the whole country.
More legal battles to come. Stephen, I'm guessing we'll be talking to you again soon. Thank you very much. Stephen Dreyfuss joining us from New York.